down that way. I got to tell you something. One of the coolest things, if you guys have never done this and gone to Lambeau Field, when I flew into Lambeau, when I was a rookie, I never in a million years knew where the place was. I knew my legendary uncle, Andy Robustelli, had played at Lambeau numerous times, and he and Lombardi were dear friends because Vince was on the New York Giants coaching staff when my uncle played back with the Giants. And you fly into, I think it's Appleton, then you go through all these communities, and you're like, where am I going, to somebody's house? And then you come over this hill, and there it is, the Cathedral of Football, Lambeau Field. It's one of the coolest places I've ever been to. I played at some of the greatest college football stadiums of all time. You go into Lambeau. I do like Arrowhead. I thought that was a really great place. I've played at RFK, but there's nothing like Lambeau Field. And when my uncle told me years ago, there were two voices in NFL history during when I was a young kid. They were John Facenda and Ray Scott. Okay? And if you don't know who Ray Scott is, you better pick a book up. And Wayne Larrivee is in that line of being one of the play-by-play guys in the history of the Green Bay Packers. And that is a pretty dope thing. We got a wild card game coming up this weekend, and it's going to be at Lincoln Financial. How many playoff games has Wayne called? And I'm going to bring this stat up before I bring them on. In the last 31 years, there's only been 3 quarterbacks in Green Bay that have taken 97% of the snaps. You know, you can make that same call about the Steelers having only 3 coaches since 1969. That's how you win championships, and that's how you win. Wayne Larrivee, the voice of the Green Bay Packers, joins us now. And I got to tell you, Wayne, that's quite a stat there, man. In the last 31 years, you've had 3 dudes. When you look at the Cleveland Browns, and the Cleveland Browns have probably had 30 guys this year quarterbacking that football team. That's a pretty remarkable stat.
Yeah, it really is. And it's an incredible run on quarterbacks that they've had here in Green Bay. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see that happen again, but it's the Packers have had good fortune with the quarterbacks.
Wayne, let's do this. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong when I say this. It's been a kind of a wobbling year, it seems, for Green Bay, and streaky, where, you know, they look like they're playing really good ball. And I do think the defense has picked up the last couple weeks of the season, whereas sometimes I think because of injuries or what have you, I think it's been kind of bumpy at times. One week I turn on the Packers, I go, wow. Another week I'm like, man, it just seems a little wobbly. Have I been wrong?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting how it's worked because they have had long stretches where they played really well and won games. They've had trouble against the top teams. And if you're not in this area, you probably only see the Packers when they're playing like the Vikings or Lions or in the opener against Philadelphia, that kind of thing. And for the longest time until this past weekend, they had only lost to those 3 teams and beaten everyone else. So then they lost to the Bears this weekend. Has it been – I guess the unevenness of the season probably rotated around the injury to Jordan Love. And that certainly impacted his performance. He was injured on one of the last plays of the game in Sao Paulo against the Eagles. Didn't play the next 2 weeks. Malik Willis, they picked him up. He comes in, he plays. They win those games. They have to construct their offense differently. But nonetheless, they win those games. Jordan comes back, and they win a couple of games, and then they lose to Detroit. He goes through another injury, and then he gets healthy. And through late November into December, they were playing really, really well. And of late, the defense, as you mentioned accurately, has come on over the second half of the season, and it's one of the better defenses in the league. But the offense hasn't quite hit on all cylinders. They were at the end of last year. So going into the playoffs this year, although they have a much better record than they had a year ago, they're still the 7th seed, and they're probably not playing with that kind of momentum they had a year ago.
Let me give you a silver lining in that here, too. I mean, do you think that helped develop the run game more, that because the quarterback played pretty much the entire year banged up, and there were stretches, like you said, where they were worried about him and that running game? I heard Vic Fangio talking about it today, that it's one of the better groups, and Josh Jacobs has been just a godsend while your quarterback has been banged up. But silver lining here, Wayne, don't you think that helped develop the offensive line and also the run game you have?
That's a real good perspective, Dan. I would say yes and no. When they got Josh Jacobs, one of the reasons they got him was because they felt that they needed a physical bell cow running back who they didn't have to worry about how many touches he was getting a game. They didn't have to worry about load management with this guy. And he's been everything. He's been all of that. When Jordan went out and they went run heavy against Indianapolis and Tennessee in those games without Jordan Love, I think, did it open their eyes a little bit that they could really lean on this ground game? Maybe it did, but I think they knew all along that they had a ground game they could count on because they really liked this back that they picked up.
I got to tell you, Wayne, I said this about Matt LaFleur a year ago. I go, okay, no Aaron Rodgers. We're going to find out what kind of guy this guy is as a play caller. I got to tell you, he is a really good play calling. No, he's a great play calling head coach. They're fundamentally sound. When you put the 22 on and you watch Green Bay, there's detail. You see the attention to it. You see the play calling. They mix you up a lot. I mean, they keep you on your toes. They spread the ball out well. He has been a really good head coach. I mean, Mike McCarthy, Mike Holmgren, you want to throw Mike Sherman in there, all winning coaches. I get it and all, but boy, have you been surprised how good he's been as a play calling head coach? Maybe right in there with Holmgren and McCarthy when you had him up there.
Yeah, Dan, I didn't know much about him when they hired him. He had spent 1 year on the staff at Tennessee where he called offensive plays. And when he was with Sean McVay in Los Angeles, McVay called the plays. Matt was the offensive coordinator. Matt's younger brother, Mike, is there now in the same kind of role. So I didn't know much about Matt LaFleur. And I knew he was on the Shanahan tree and all of that. And this goes back to where now you have to go back about 5-6 years here, and maybe 7 years, folks. But there was a time in the NFL where if you were seen in a latrine with Sean McVay, you were NFL head coaching material. And then Bill Belichick beat McVay and the Rams in the Super Bowl 28-3, and all of that went away. Oh, okay. I guess no, that's not a big deal. But they hired this young coach. He had spent 1 year at Tennessee. And it wasn't a great year. They didn't have a great quarterback situation. It wasn't a great year. He comes up to Green Bay. Now he's got Aaron Rodgers. And that's a blessing and a curse. Why is it a blessing? Well, Aaron Rodgers can run this offense and that type of thing and get you through, get you into plays that work or whatever. Okay, so he gives you a chance to win right away. But what he also does, he kind of overshadows everything you're doing because all the credit's going to Aaron Rodgers. And that happens not just in Green Bay, not just in football, it happens in all sports. Phil Jackson won 11 NBA World Championships. Not once was he Coach of the Year. Not once. Think about that, folks. And so that's kind of what Matt was up against. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers leaves. Now, Matt LaFleur, a lot of drama goes out of the building. But you're also losing a quarterback who's going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best quarterbacks your organization has ever had, and the face of the franchise. They come off of him. Now they're in salary cap hell. They've got the youngest team in the NFL. And Matt LaFleur, though, was much more comfortable and much, his dad told me he was just much more at ease now that he could basically go ahead and say, this is how I want to mold this team and this offense. Because he adapted what he wanted to do as a coach to what Aaron Rodgers wanted to do and was capable of doing. That's good coaching in itself. But now once Rodgers leaves, they got a young quarterback, and all of a sudden they've got this young team, and they go through the mid-portion of the season losing 4 in a row, and then they catch fire and make the playoffs last year. And people start realizing, hey, Matt LaFleur is a pretty good coach. And he really is. And he's always been a good coach and has done a great job with this team.
I got to tell you, and people always ask me and they go like this, they go, well, the Philadelphia Eagles have a great wide receiving group. And I go, no, they don't. They got 2 dudes.
Yeah.
They don't really have a great wide receiving group because the quarterback at times struggles in his progression readings. I want to, and I tell people this as a unit, look at the way that they spread the ball around. And this is exactly what Vic Fangio was saying. You got Jaden Reed with 55 catches. You've got Kraft with 50 catches. You've got Dobbs with 46. You got another guy with 40 catches in Wicks. You got another guy, Jacobs, out of the backfield who's got 36 catches himself. So again, I mean, the spreading of the football around and the being able to not to know where you're going to be hit if you're a defensive, he makes it uncomfortable for coordinators, doesn't he? Because there's no primary target. All that being said, with Christian Watson not being there, how does that affect the group?
Yeah.
How does that affect the approach? Because they do spread the ball around.
Christian Watson's the one guy that, and Vic Fangio would probably tell you this, you got to look at him first, okay, when you're putting together your scouting report, because he's the guy that can blow the top off this defense. He's a good receiver. He can run the full route tree, but he can literally blow the top off your defense. The problem with Christian Watson is he's not been healthy over the course of his career, and now he suffers that devastating knee injury the other day in Green Bay. And I just feel so bad for the kid. He's so talented, Dan. He could be a number one receiver, but he had hamstring issues his first couple of years. This year, they felt they got past that. He was doing well. He had a couple of injuries, had a concussion, I believe, missed a game or two, and then came back. Wasn't supposed to play this past weekend, but Romeo Doubs got sick on Saturday night, and so they dressed Christian Watson, and then all of a sudden he gets injured. So that's really that's a sad situation there because he's such a great kid and a great talent. What you're saying is true. They can spread the ball around. You don't know who's going to be the featured receiver from one week to the next. But I will submit this. In some ways, that's a little more difficult because when you have a number one receiver, and we've been around, we've seen them all, Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers, Donald Driver with Brett Favre, and all those guys. When you have a number one receiver, you suck a lot of the energy and attention of that defense, both in preparation during the week and on game day. And, I'm telling you something. Yeah, Philadelphia doesn't have as deep a receiving core as the Packers, but they've got two guys, each of whom would be number one in Green Bay, no questions asked. So, it works both ways.
Yep. Yeah, no. I completely see that. You're dead on because you're right. Game preparation, you're going to have to really take a lot of what these two guys do. And that's an interesting take on Devontae, that he'd be the number one receiver in Green Bay. I love that there. Let me ask you, Wayne, help me out on the history of your wide receiver and what your quarterbacks have done over the last 31 years, as we mentioned at the top of this. Is it true, like Christian Watson and maybe another guy in the last 35 years, you guys have drafted in the first round? Most of these guys have been second and third and fifth round guys. And it just tells you the preparation and what the quarterbacks do in developing these wide receivers, because I don't really look at the Green Bay Packers as a team that dives in and spends a lot of equity in the draft and first rounds, because even like you said, Adams was a second round pick, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I mean, so am I right that the quarterbacks in Green Bay develop wide receivers where a lot of places like Philadelphia had to go get a number one because they weren't very good at really developing a number one?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because if you go back, and I've only been here 26 years, but you go back to 31 years, I mean, it was Sterling Sharp basically developing Brett Favre, the wide receiver developing the quarterback, which is exactly the reverse of how it normally works. But Brett developed some outstanding receivers, Mark Chmura as a tight end, Robert Brooks at wide receiver, then Donald Driver, who was a seventh-round draft choice, develops into a big receiver. Greg Jennings was a second or third-round draft choice. Christian Watson was a second-rounder. Jordy Nelson, a second-round draft choice. And these guys, the quarterbacks have been able to develop these guys because the quarterbacking has been so good here. But the Packers have an eye for wide receivers, and they have an eye, it seems like, in the second round. The one guy, I hope I get his name right, Javon Walker, Mike Sherman took him in the first round. Back in maybe 2003.
Yeah.
And he was the last first round receiver they drafted that I remember.
Yeah.
And so, it's amazing what they've done.
I've never seen anything like it. Like, it's almost like Pittsburgh does the same stuff. If you look at the Steelers, because the Steelers don't really spend a lot of equity. Antonio Brown was a late round draft choice. Hines Ward was a mid-round guy. So, I mean, they really do a great job. A couple more for you here, Wayne. Xavier McKinney's impact on your team has been what?
I'm sorry?
Xavier McKinney's impact on your team has been what?
It's been huge. In one word, huge. On the field, obviously, he's got 8 interceptions, 9 takeaways on his own. But you got to understand what they're working with in that secondary now. You've got young safeties, okay? He's working with Javon Bullard, a rookie, Evan Williams, another rookie safety. He's coordinating a secondary that does not have its best cover corner, Jair Alexander, who's been gone virtually all year. I think it's been profound. A guy like him, the character he brings to the locker room, he impacts these young players, teaching them how to look at film. Because players come out of college, they don't know what they're looking at. They really don't. Oh, I look at a lot of film. Yeah, but what are you looking for? I mean, the reason the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010, one of the unsung players on that team, one of the unsung reasons they won was the performance of Charles Woodson, not on the field, but off the field. He took all these young guys like Nick Collins and Tremont Williams and brought them under his wing and said, no, guys, this is what you're looking for on film here. This is what these guys do. This is how we're, and he taught them how to prepare. Well, McKinney's having very much the same impact in the Packers. And on offense, Jacobs has brought that same type of thing same type of energy and intangible to the offensive side of the football. They've both been remarkably impactful here.
Finally here, would you agree Sunday's chance for the Packers to win? Got to establish the run game, kind of what you did in Green Bay, in Sao Paulo, in what you did. You had to establish the run game to get play action going, and you got to stop the run. I mean, you've been pretty good at stopping the run this year, especially over the last month. They've really upped their game in stopping the run, and you've got to make this a fourth quarter football game and give it to Love in the fourth quarter and take your best shot there in the fourth quarter. Is that how you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think the Packers have to get on the lead, play on the lead in this game. They might have to. They're a turnover type defense. They're top 5 in takeaways. Need to get a turnover, maybe 2. You're exactly right. They've got to stop the run. If Jalen Hurts is playing, and I think he will, I don't know how many designed runs they'll have for a guy who's been out for 3 weeks with a concussion. But when you rush Jalen Hurts, you must contain him. Okay, it's not a matter of sacks. It's a matter of don't let him get outside, on the edge and hurt us with his legs, because he can do that. Very good against the run. The Packers have been, especially lately. You're exactly right. 3rd in rush average, which I think is the big stat in run defense. But I think they've got to get, the Packers have to get out on the lead and, kind of carry the tempo of the game if they can. They fall behind the Eagles like they fell behind the Vikings twice and the Lions twice in Philadelphia. That's not a good scenario.
I'll leave you with this because we get Merrill Reese on. He'll be on tomorrow. He's a dear friend of ours. He comes on our show pretty much weekly, and we talk. What I love about it is, he talks about all the generations of Philadelphia Eagle fans that he talks to. I wonder for you if that's a same feeling that you have, because that's such a tight community up there. I know folks who live up there. I know folks who have played up there. Lonzo Highsmith, by the way, was my former teammate at the University of Miami. And, he was up there for an executive for years.
Yep.
And I've played up there too. I wonder if you have that same kind of feeling that it's just not being a broadcaster for a football team. It's being a broadcaster pretty much for one of the most iconic franchises in all of sports, not just football.
Oh, no question about it, Dan. I mean, it's a tremendous honor. And you're right, the fans, they're unique. It's funny. This is, football is important in some markets and not all markets, okay? Right. All markets that have NFL teams, it's not as important as it is in certain markets in this country, Green Bay being one, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. I think it's a big deal in Buffalo. New York. It's huge in Chicago. It's huge in Kansas City and Denver. It's, it's another piece of entertainment in L.A. I think San Francisco is pretty good because they've won so much over the years. So they have a great fan base. It's, but it's not big in every place. And I've been fortunate. I've worked in Kansas City back when they were not good. Marv Levy's first years as a head coach. I've worked in Chicago with the 85 Bears when it was unbelievable. And then, in Green Bay. And I've had the honor of working in 3 of the top football markets in the country and for NFL. And it's just been a blessing. It really has. And you're exactly right. You talk to fans of all kinds of different generations. It's amazing when you think about it.
But wait a minute. I can't let you out of here when I heard 85 Bears. You've got to give these folks a Buddy Ryan. You've got to give them something on Buddy Ryan here. You being around Buddy Ryan and that maniac 85 Bears team. Let me tell you this, Wayne. They came down and played us in Tampa one year. This was 1987. They come down there, and I knew Mongo very well. I used to talk to him when he was at Texas, and I marveled at his game. I kind of patterned myself after him. This guy's out at a bar, Malika's bar, down there in Chicago or down there in Tampa. He's out all night with Hampton. These guys come in, they play a game the next day. These guys were maniacs, but you have to please give us a story here about Buddy.
He was probably out at Mons Venus.
Right there on Dale Mabry. Not that I know where it is. I just heard it there.
Yeah. I think we're incriminating ourselves on this program here right now. Oh, Buddy Ryan. I got to tell you, it's amazing. But we're in Miami. The Bears are undefeated. It's a big Monday night game in Miami, one of the biggest ones in the history of the entire series. So we're in Miami. It's the old Orange Bowl. It's Dan Marino, Duper, Clayton, all those guys. Here are the 85 Bears. And Jim McMahon's still on the shelf with an injury. And Miami just jumps all over the Bears. All of a sudden, they're moving the football like crazy. So it's halftime, and the Bears are down. And, Ditka and Buddy Ryan had a more of a truce than a coaching collaboration type thing. One time Ditka early on in his tenure went into Buddy Ryan's meeting room, and Buddy said, "What the hell are you doing in here? Get the hell out." But anyway, at halftime, so Ditka says, "You got to do this. You got to." And Buddy Ryan and Ditka almost came to blows, and the players had to break it up. The Bears go on to lose that game. And the next day, do you remember the song Super Bowl Shuffle?
Yes.
We take a red eye back home, and the next morning, those players went to a studio and did that show and did that recording. They did the video, they did this record, the whole thing. Dan Hampton decided, the great Hall of Fame defensive lineman, he says, "I'm not doing that. We haven't won anything yet." But everybody else showed up and did it. And it's just one of the way that team was. They were not going to be derailed by one loss. I think the only disappointment of the 85 season was that they didn't get Miami in the Super Bowl. New England beat Miami in Miami and eventually made the Super Bowl.
Wayne, I got to sneak this in on you. Do you think they underachieved not winning more Super Bowls?
Yeah. Well, I know, and got to know a lot of the guys after that. I worked with many of them on the air in Chicago. Yeah, that's the first thing they would tell you, and that hurts more than the Super Bowl, the glow of the Super Bowl, because you're an athlete, you're a pro athlete, the losses are much tougher to take than the joy of winning. You know what I mean? The joy of winning doesn't last nearly as long as the sting of a loss. And, the Bears, we all thought they were the youngest team in the league, when they won that Super Bowl. Youngest team in the league. Of course they're going to win 2 or 3 more. This is a dynasty. Has to be. And that's before free agency now. Don't forget that, folks. That's before players moved around a whole lot.
Yep.
So, but they never got it back. They kind of lost the edge. The thing that bound them together as talents, as personalities, as spirits on this earth, the thing that bound them together was winning the Super Bowl after they were shut down in San Francisco the year before in the NFC Championship game. Once they won that Super Bowl, boom, it was like all of a sudden the direction was lost. Everybody was out to get everything that they could get. And they really kind of lost focus. I understand they went 14-2 the next year, but they lost at home in the playoffs to a Washington Redskins team that wasn't that good. And they lost the following year in the same situation at home to Washington. And that's the thing that really that stings with those players in that era.
Probably for you too, Wayne, having watched and how much talent they had. And like you said, they put a 15-1 team, then a 14. You're talking 30-3 basically in 3 years, counting the playoffs, over 30 wins in 2 years.
Yeah.
That's insane for them not to go back to back. And I wonder if that dynamic between Buddy Ryan and Mike Ditka not being in the locker room, because they saw the energy with those two. Once Buddy left that room, like you said, as you know, Wayne, sometimes when you grab the golden cup and you drink from it once, it's very hard to go back to it again and find it again. That's why repeating in our league is so hard. but there's also has to be an energy and a dynamic in that locker room. And I wonder if that relationship really fueled that football team to see those players, because weren't they divided where it was the defensive team, that was the offensive team, and then there was a team on Sundays?
Yeah. No, Dan, you're right. And I think the, Buddy's last game with the Bears was the Super Bowl 20, okay? He became coach of the Eagles, I believe, the week later.
Yep.
And that dynamic was missing. I haven't really thought about it like that. But, yeah, maybe something was missing there. However, Vince Tobin came in, a fine defensive coordinator, and their numbers were better defensively in 1986 than they were in 85. But there was something missing from that team, that edge they had that got them to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl. That edge was gone, and I don't think people understand there's something mystical about winning a championship in football, because 53 people have to be on the same page. That's hard to do in our society. And the other thing is, there's a lot of bounce of the ball. It's one and done. It's not best of 7. You have a bad afternoon, your quarterback throws an interception at the wrong time, you're gone. And I saw it with the Packers. They won the Super Bowl 2010. 2011, they went 15-1. And the Giants came in, and the Packers had the home field advantage throughout the playoffs, number 1 seed. Giants came in and beat them down in the second half and went on to win the Super Bowl. So, hey, it's tough. It's not just about talent. There's something mystical about it. And if it's not your year, I don't care how good you are, you're not winning.
That's right, man. That's why these NFL playoffs this weekend, I don't care what your record is, man. You got out there, you got to play 60 minutes, because best man win in this fight. I mean, that's how this thing is. Wayne, have a great call, my friend, and thank you so much for your time.
Dan, always good to be with you. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Thank you so much, my friend. Wayne Larrivee, the golden voice of the Green Bay Packers, and one time the voice of the Chicago Bears and the 85 Bears. I didn't know that, or I had forgotten that he was there when Buddy Ryan was there in Chicago. That, think about that. Now, look at all those things. Look at the records so wait a minute. The Chicago Bears at 85. They went 15-1, and then they turned around the following year, went 14-2. They were 29-3 2 years. Who's that kind of remind you of a little bit with 2 14-win teams? How you doing? Hey, man, where's my boy M. Reyes? I need a 14-3. Somebody give me a 14-3. How you doing? Come on, Sue. Come on, red bottom Sue. Give me a 14-3. Oh, this is great. Wow. Woo! How you doing? High IQ, can't read a defense, can't throw 30 TD passes, a 30th passing attack, a great scrambler, took 40-plus sacks, 45-plus sacks. And there's a triple quarterback. There's a triple threat quarterback if I know one. Look at this. High IQ. Can't read a defense. Can throw 30th passing attack. Great scrambler. Took 45-plus sacks. And there is a triple threat quarterback if I've ever seen one. How you doing? Yeah. Come on, Pop. 14-3. You got the Green Bay Packers. Hey, wait a minute here. You guys, hey, before I take a time out here, hold on. Then we'll go over what the coaches said today. Get you some takeaway here. Hold on here. Where is that? I got you know what, guys? You make me prepare so much for you fuckers, man. Oh. You make me prepare so much for you guys. It's absolutely sick here. So let me see here, man. Yeah, here it is. There's nowhere you have the advantage. Hey, Pump. Pump, the only advantage the Packers have is that quarterback. Hey, Pump. The only advantage The Green Bay Packers have